Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Zhou Wudao. The coldness in Bai Xiaochun's eyes was such that the entire private chamber suddenly seemed as frigid as the dead of winter. Although he didn't fully understand the reason Bai Hao had gone missing, he now had a general idea. A patriarch in Miao Linner's clan was a necromancer at the peak of the celestial rank, who planned to use Bai Hao's soul in a flame conjuring to achieve a breakthrough. Out of fear of Bai Xiaochun, he had allied with 13 other clans, and had also somehow called upon the aid of the 9 Serenities king. That was how they had managed to snatch Bai Hao the previous month without leaving a single trace of evidence behind. Afterward, the Miao clan patriarch had gone into hiding in one of the clans, a clan where no one would think to look. After all, when it came to the heavenly marquises of the Arch-Emperor dynasty, Zhou Wudao was neither among the 10 most powerful, nor among the 10 weakest. He was somewhere in the middle. He wasn't a very well-spoken person, and thus didn't have many dealings with others. He was basically the quiet type. He was one of the people in the dynastic court who almost never spoke. If he was ever forced to speak, he would always go along with the majority. He was so unassuming that many people even forgot he existed. Bai Xiaochun had never heard of him before the proclamation of universal grace. However, it was a bastard son of Zhou Wudao who secretly sent the critical information. Never could Bai Xiaochun have guessed that Bai Hao would be in that clan. Of course, Zhou Wudao's clan was one of the 13 who had helped the Miao clan. As for who the other 12 clans were, Bai Xiaochun had still not yet unearthed any clues. However, he wasn't very concerned with that information. All of his efforts during the past month had been focused on finding Bai Hao. As far as what he had just learned, he had no intention of reporting it to the Grand Heaven Master. The matter was simply too important, and he couldn't risk the chance that the Grand Heaven Master would refuse him the right to act. If word leaked out, and if his enemies were alerted, then it might very well become impossible to track Bai Hao down again. He couldn't gamble when it came to something this vital. As he rose to his feet, his murderous aura grew stronger. The time had come to vent all of the madness which had been building up over the last month. The time had come to do some killing. Without the slightest hesitation, he sent a message to Zhou Yixing with certain instructions. Then he strode out into the open and flew up into the air above the inspections manor. With the wave of a sleeve, he sent some divine sense out, and then headed at top speed toward the location of Zhou Wudao's clan. At the same time, rumbling sounds could be heard as countless corpse troopers flew up to follow him. In this case, he didn't take 5,000, but rather 4,000. The other 1,000 were in Zhou Yixing's hands to handle other matters. Bai Xiaochun plus 4,000 beams of light shot through the air, surrounded by a black vortex that was the most powerful of murderous auras. The sky rippled, and a screaming wind kicked up, attracting the shocked attention of numerous individuals in Arch-Emperor City. Bai Xiaochun ignored all of the gazes which came to focus on him, nor did he attempt to prevent his eyes from being completely bloodshot. He looked completely mad, and engulfed by a shocking killing intent. His veins of steel pulsed explosively, as though he had become a devilish god. As he raced along, the anxiety in his heart mounted. He felt guilt, frenzy, nervousness, apprehension, and all sorts of other emotions, all of which shoved him deeper into madness. Very rarely in Bai Xiaochun's life did he ever wish to kill people, but in this situation, he had been pushed too far. He had just spent a month searching for clues, and now that he had a target, it was impossible for him to dispel that killing intent. Of course, through it all, he reminded himself that his main goal right now was not revenge, it was to save Bai Hao. He and his 4,000 corpse troopers sailed over dozens of burrows until they closed in on Burrow 61, where a heavenly marquee pagoda rose high into the air. When Bai Xiaochun saw it, his eyes flashed with sharp light. This place was the Zhou clan. After scanning the place with divine sense but finding nothing, he turned and transmitted a message to his silver-armored corpse trooper. Can you detect a hidden chamber anywhere in the Zhou clan? A chamber containing a celestial necromancer? The silver-armored corpse trooper's eyes flashed, and he studied the Zhou clan. After a moment, he shook his head. There must be some unique secret magic at work that defies divine sense. Bai Xiaochun's eyes narrowed, and yet he didn't hesitate. As soon as he was outside the Zhou clan, he loudly said, I want 2,000 corpse troopers to form a perimeter. No one is allowed to enter this clan from the air or the ground. Nor may anyone leave. Instantly, 2,000 of the corpse troopers flew out and formed ranks, locking down everything around the Zhou clan. They were completely surrounded. The 2,000 corpse troopers quickly created a spell formation which caused black smoke to roil out and cover the entire Zhou clan, sealing it completely. Cries of alarm rang up from inside the clan, especially from the appointed successor in the clan. As for the Marquis himself, he looked up angrily at the corpse trooper army, at the seal locking down the clan, and at Bai Xiaochun with his murderous aura. It only took a moment for the Heavenly Marquis to realize what was happening. He was one of the very few people in the clan who knew that Miao Linner's grandfather was hiding amongst them, and that his clan had been one of the people involved in the abduction of the Inspections Commissioner's sole slave. Therefore, his anger regarding the proclamation of universal grace had mostly been a mask to cover his anxiety. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had suddenly shown up caused his face to fall and his mind to reel with the realization that he knew the truth. "Activate the formation," he said. Then he bit down on his tongue and spit out a mouthful of blood. That blood was a key aspect needed to activate the clan's spell formation. A moment later, a huge blood-colored shield sprang up, instantly spreading out to protect the clan. That was the exact moment in which Bai Xiaochun and his 2,000 corpse troopers arrived. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately had the corpse troopers violently attack the shield. Most shocking of all, though, were not the brutal corpse troopers, but Bai Xiaochun, who had a vicious snarl on his face as he attacked with the explosive violence of an erupting volcano. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook violently, and a huge shockwave blasted out in all directions, causing many nearby structures to rock back and forth. The blood-colored shield immediately began to twist and distort, and then, after only a few breaths of time passed, it shattered into countless fragments that rained down onto the clan below. The clan was thrown into a huge commotion, with many cultivators coughing up blood and looking up with incredulity. Some even began to cry out, "What are you doing, Bai Hao? Our clan didn't break any rules, nor did we offend you. What are you doing?" The heir apparent of the clan was also present. Eyes flashing with anger, he shouted, "This is an abuse of power, Bai Hao. You're using your public office to get revenge for personal matters. The Grand Heaven Master is going to find out about this, and the rest of the nobility and aristocracy too. Nobody will be able to protect you then. You'll die for sure. Fellow clan members, join forces. If we stand against him for long enough, someone will definitely come to rescue us." However, even as he spoke these words, he fled in the direction of his Heavenly Marquis pagoda. Although not everyone in the clan leapt to obey the orders of the heir apparent, many of the senior generation flew angrily up into the sky toward Bai Xiaochun. Even some of the most loyal of the clan servants joined them. There were more than 1,000 in total. And yet, as soon as they met Bai Xiaochun's advancing corpse troopers, fierce fighting broke out, along with agonized shrieks. The Zhou clan was fundamentally incapable of resistance. Blood sprayed out of the mouths of those who came forth to fight, and they were sent tumbling backward. Then, a chilling voice rang out, which belonged to none other than Bai Xiaochun. "That's right, I am here for personal revenge. But I only want to kill 3 people. And if anybody tries to stop me, I'll cut them down." Bai Xiaochun couldn't care less whether the other members of the Zhou clan lived or died. However, there were 2 people who had long since been on his list to kill. One was Zhou Wudao, and the other was Miao Linner's grandfather. Now, there was a new person on that list, the heir apparent. Without pausing for a moment, Bai Xiaochun shot with lightning-like speed toward that very heir apparent. The heir apparent's face was pale white as he sped toward the Heavenly Marquis pagoda. Just when he was about to reach it, Bai Xiaochun suddenly appeared in front of him and unleashed a fist strike. That fist strike contained all of Bai Xiaochun's anger and madness. It ripped the air apart, and provoked a shrill scream from the heir apparent. A profound sensation of deadly crisis filled him, as though he knew that there was no longer a place for him to live in this world. This was his clan, where he was supposed to be safe, and yet, unprecedented deadly danger had found him. "Father, save me," he shouted. At this point, a beam of dazzling light shot out from the Heavenly Marquis pagoda, accompanied by a cold and sinister voice. "If you dare to kill my son, Bai Hao, then your soul slave will be destroyed beyond the shadow of a doubt." Currently sitting in the Heavenly Marquis pagoda was a middle-aged man of average height and appearance. He was a half-diva, but among half-devas, could not be considered particularly strong. However, with the power of his Heavenly Marquis pagoda, he was capable of battle prowess roughly equivalent to a full diva. That was why, despite how Bai Hao had attacked his clan and destroyed their shield, he had waited patiently inside of the Heavenly Marquis pagoda. At the moment, he felt hesitant and fearful, not of Bai Xiaochun, but of his corpse troopers, especially the one wearing silver armor. At the same time, he still felt confident in some aspects. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had come here showed how important his soul slave was to him. And therefore, Zhou Wudao was confident that he wouldn't kill his son. He was just trying to create some pressure, or perhaps bring about a scenario in which he could offer a trade for his soul slave. Whichever was the case, the inspections commissioner definitely wouldn't resort to killing. After all, Zhou Wudao was a heavenly marquis, and this was Arch-Emperor City. The inspections commissioner still answered to the Grand Heaven Master, and despite how crazy he was acting, he hadn't become irrational. I just need to buy some time, he thought. With that, he produced a transmission jade slip to send a message asking for help. However, in Zhou Wudao's moment of confidence, Bai Xiaochun's eyes turned more bloodshot than before. Ignoring the beam of light shooting down from the heavenly marquee pagoda, he sent his fist flying forward with even greater speed than before. It pierced through the air like the gust of a storm wind, landing directly onto the back of the fleeing heir apparent. The heir apparent had a mid-nascent soul stage cultivation base, whereas Bai Xiaochun had battle prowess similar to a half-diva. How could this heir apparent possibly defend himself against that? Intense rumbling sounds filled the air as a scream escaped the young man's lips that vastly surpassed anything from before. However, the scream didn't last for long. The explosive power of the fist reduced him to nothing more than a haze of blood and gore. Even his nascent soul was incapable of escape, and was ripped to pieces. The heir apparent was destroyed in body and soul. Not even his bones remained behind. As for the beam of light from the heavenly marquee pagoda, the silver-armored corpse trooper stepped forward and took the blow for Bai Xiaochun. Bai Hao, Zhou Wudao shouted in apoplectic rage as he leapt to his feet. How dare you kill a child of mine? Never in his wildest imagination could he have imagined that Bai Xiaochun would actually be so decisive, and also so uncompromising. The other members of the Zhou clan who had just witnessed what happened were left shaking physically. His chilling words from earlier had already prompted a large number to give up thoughts of interfering with him, but now, all of them were terrified to the extreme. It wasn't just them. A crowd had already begun to build up in the area beyond the perimeter created by the corpse troopers, and when they saw what had just occurred, many of them gasped. To kill a heavenly marquis son in this way showed how deep his enmity went. I guess I haven't killed enough people since coming to Arch-Emperor City, Bai Xiaochun said in a fierce and brutal tone. Well, since you and your friends decided to attack me personally, then not only will I kill your son, I'm going to kill you too. Even as his words continued to echo in the air, he burst forward with explosive speed toward the heavenly marquee pagoda. As he closed in, several beams of dazzling light shot out from the pagoda toward him. Simultaneously, the side of the pagoda rippled as a shadowy figure emerged. That shadowy figure was one of the miraculous abilities of the heavenly marquee pagoda, a magical clone which immediately shot toward Bai Xiaochun in attack. It was at this point that the corpse troopers, including the silver-armored one, split off and began to search the buildings for Miao Liner's grandfather. Obviously, Bai Xiaochun had given them the order to do so. He didn't need the help of his corpse troopers for this fight. In fact, he wanted a chance to vent the anger, madness, and guilt which had built up over the last month. Rumbling booms could be heard as the dazzling beams of light landed on Bai Xiaochun, and yet, he didn't even blink in response. He only picked up speed, hurtling toward the magical clone at top speed. As he closed in, he shoved out his right hand. An explosive blast of wind spread out in all directions in response. In response, the magical clone of Zhou Wudao snorted coldly and performed an incantation gesture, summoning a horde of illusory pythons to attack Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's expression didn't change at all. He clenched his right fist, which caused a black vortex to appear, along with a terrifying gravitational force. It was as if all of the energy in the entire area were being sucked into that vortex. Even Bai Xiaochun's aura vanished, until it almost seemed like he didn't exist. However, that was when a domineering figure appeared behind him. This was none other than the Undying Emperor's fist. It was an attack that had left Mistress Red Dust visibly surprised, and was very close to the power of a diva. A massive amount of force was building up around Bai Xiaochun. It almost seemed like night was falling in his area as all of the light was sucked into that black vortex. Zhou Wudao's shadowy clone felt an intense sensation of deadly crisis building up, and let out a shout, simultaneously performing a double-handed incantation gesture that caused the pythons to all form together into a 300-meter-wide defensive formation. However, that defensive formation was as effective against Bai Xiaochun's Undying Emperor's fist as a mantis was against a war chariot. Boom! The python formation was ripped to shreds, becoming a cloud of gore and bones which rapidly transformed into nothing more than ash. Zhou Wudao's clone couldn't have looked more shocked at how wildly destructive the Undying Emperor's fist was. Things weren't over yet, though. As the darkness of night grew stronger in the area, the Heavenly Marquee Pagoda began to shake. Inside, Zhou Wudao coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his face turned as white as a sheet as he spared no effort to fight back with the powers of the pagoda. Time to double it up, Bai Xiaochun said, eyes glittering. Clenching his hand into a fist, he unleashed the Undying Emperor's fist again, this time with double the level of power. The darkness in the area converged on itself, making a huge black fist that caused everyone who saw it to gasp in shock. Then that fist slammed into the Heavenly Marquee Pagoda. Heaven and earth shook violently, all of Arch-Emperor City trembled. A moment later, the Undying Emperor's fist faded away, and the Heavenly Marquee Pagoda still stood. Bai Xiaochun hovered just outside of it, his expression as cold as ice. Inside the pagoda, Zhou Wudao was coughing up more blood, and had visibly aged, and yet was laughing madly. So what if you have a diva-level fist strike? This is a Heavenly Marquee Pag, however, before Zhou Wudao could finish speaking, cracking sounds could be heard. His face fell, and then drained of blood as he saw a crack appear right beneath him. Impossible, impossible. Zhou Wudao felt like his mind had been struck by lightning, and his face was covered with an expression of unmitigated horror. Then, more cracking sounds could be heard. More and more cracks began to spread out through the pagoda, as, within the space of a few breaths of time, it collapsed. As the Heavenly Marquee Pagoda collapsed, complete silence filled the area. Everyone in the clan felt like their minds were being struck by lightning from the heavens. To a Heavenly Marquee clan, their Heavenly Marquee Pagoda was a symbol of how lofty and amazing their clan was. It was the most important legacy in their clan, passed on to each successor as a means to defend the clan. And right now, the Zhou clan's Heavenly Marquee Pagoda was collapsing into pieces. Although this was not the first such pagoda to be destroyed after the Arch-Emperor dynasty relocated to the Wildlands, it was the only one to meet such a fate in the past 1,000 years. The significance of this event defied imagination. If that was how the Zhou clan reacted, then there was little need to wonder how everyone else in the audience was reacting. There were countless people observing events on behalf of other powerful groups, and also just random people interested in watching, and all of them were dumbstruck. The Zhou clan's Heavenly Marquee Pagoda is collapsing. This Bai Hao actually dared to destroy a Heavenly Marquee Pagoda. Zhou Wudao emerged from within the collapsing pagoda, blood spraying out of his mouth, and looking visibly older than before. The instant he appeared in the open, he didn't charge toward Bai Xiaochun in attack, but rather, turned and fled. He had no other choice than to do so. Bai Xiaochun's fist strike had been unimaginably shocking, so powerful that it actually destroyed a lofty and magnificent Heavenly Marquee Pagoda. To Zhou Wudao, it was almost inconceivable. Most people only knew a little bit about how Heavenly Marquee pagodas actually worked, but as a Heavenly Marquee, he had complete control over his own pagoda, and was thus deeply struck by what had just occurred. He knew that the so-called Heavenly Marquee pagodas were not created by Heavenly Marquises. Instead, they had been built along with Arch-Emperor City itself. More specifically, they were shocking magical devices that could focus and release the power of an unseen spell formation. After all, what was visible of Arch-Emperor City right now was actually only a part of the true extent of the city. There was more buried underground. And as for the Heavenly Marquee pagodas, they could enable a half-diva Heavenly Marquee to unleash battle prowess equivalent to a full diva. And of course, the Heavenly Duke pagodas were even more impressive. The power of the pagodas was limited to some extent. After all, they were expensive to fully power up, and that would not be permitted unless the Arch-Emperor dynasty were under direct threat. Even still, they were powerful enough that no ordinary person could possibly attack them successfully. In fact, the one which had been successfully destroyed 1,000 years ago, had been during a battle of demigods. Because of that, there was no way that Zhou Wudao could ever have guessed that his Heavenly Marquee pagoda would collapse. Although he wasn't sure how it was happening, he had his suspicions, and they terrified him. If it isn't his cultivation base, then it must be some special divine ability. That fist strike is actually a magical technique. But what? Zhou Wudao's face was ashen as he realized that he had provoked someone he was most certainly not powerful enough to have provoked. Thus, it was without the slightest hesitation that he fled as quickly as possible. An icy glint appeared in Bai Xiaochun's eyes. He didn't know much about Heavenly Marquee pagodas, and therefore, was a bit confused by Zhou Wudao's reaction. It was with lightning-like speed that he immediately gave chase, when suddenly, a shadowy blur appeared from within the rubble of a collapsing building at the edge of the Zhou clan. The figure was partially translucent and was moving directly toward the corpse troopers who had the area locked down. Not only was the figure moving quickly, it was using some sort of divine ability that slowed the corpse troopers down. As a result, it seemed to be just on the verge of breaking through the blockade. However, that was when Bai Xiaochun stopped, turned, and vanished. When he reappeared, he was right in front of the shadowy figure. It was almost as if he had been waiting for this person to make a break for it. "So, you finally show your face," he said, his eyes radiating icy coldness and killing intent. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the air around him began to swirl like a vortex. Unexpectedly, the intensity of his killing intent actually surpassed what had appeared when he had attacked Zhou Wudao. "You," the shadowy figure blurted, suddenly backing up. At that point, it resolved into the image of an old man. He seemed alarmed. Clearly, he had believed himself very clever for attempting to flee when the heavenly marquee pagoda fell, and Bai Xiaochun went chasing after Zhou Wudao. By fleeing at that time, and using his special technique to slow the reactions of the corpse troopers, he had been very confident in being able to make his escape. Never could he have imagined that Bai Xiaochun would be prepared for just something like this. The old man was caught completely unaware. The truth was that as soon as Bai Xiaochun had arrived at the Zhou clan and found that neither he nor his silver-armored corpse trooper could use their divine sense to find this old man, he had come up with his plan. One of the reasons he had killed the heir apparent was to vent his anger, but the other was to prevent Zhou Wudao from buying time and getting help. The whole point to his offensive had not been to kill anyone, but to give Miao Linner's grandfather what he believed was a chance to escape. Only by pushing things to the very limit, and by making his opponent think that he was completely mad, would the man be confident enough to try to escape. That was why he had attacked with such ruthless efficiency, and had immediately resorted to the undying Emperor's fist. The whole time, his divine sense had been spread out through the clan, and especially focused on his corpse troopers. He knew that the old necromancer would attempt to escape by breaking through the ceiling blockade, and that was exactly what he had been waiting for. Now that the old man was backing away from him, Bai Xiaochun stepped forward. At the same time, he sent a thought out to his corpse troopers, causing them to reinforce and shrink the perimeter. Meanwhile, the silver-armored corpse trooper unleashed the power of his diva cultivation base and headed toward the old necromancer. It only took moments to lock down everything above and below. As of this point, it didn't matter what special technique this old man had, he would not be escaping. Zhou Wudao was also affected, and had to start backing away from the corpse troopers. There was simply no way he could break through that barrier. Miao Linner's grandfather could see that it was a critical moment. Eyes flickering with madness, he suddenly looked over at Bai Xiaochun and shouted, "Let me go, Bai Hao. If you don't, then a single thought from me will wipe your soul slave out of existence." Apparently worried that Bai Xiaochun might be convinced that his soul slave was dead, the old man performing an incantation gesture, causing a soul shadow to appear on his forehead. That soul shadow was Bai Hao, who was trapped in the old man's forehead, slowly being burned and clearly in critical danger. Bai Xiaochun stopped in place, trembling inwardly as he looked at Bai Hao's soul shadow. The corpse troopers also stopped, including the silver-armored one, although his diva fluctuations grew more intense. "If you let me go," the old man said nervously, "I'll give you back your soul slave." His eyes darted back and forth between Bai Xiaochun and the silver-armored corpse trooper with the diva cultivation base. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had stopped moving instantly boosted his confidence. He could clearly see how important this soul slave was to him. "Back down now. I'll give you 10 breaths of time." The old man's eyes were glittering more brightly than ever, and off to the side, Zhou Wudao's heart leapt with anticipation. Bai Xiaochun looked away from Bai Hao's soul shadow and into the eyes of the celestial necromancer. Although he was very nervous, he was feeling more merciless than ever. Voice cold, he said, "I'll give you 10 breaths of time to decide. Either you die, or every last member of the Miao clan dies. The choice is yours." Waving his hand, he summoned a screen of light, within which was an image. It depicted the inspection's manor, within which were tens of thousands of soul cultivators. There were men and women of all types, and they were all trembling with fear. Miao Linner was there, her face pale and covered with dread. They were surrounded by an army of corpse troopers who pulsed with murderous auras, their leader being none other than Zhou Yixing. Miao Linner's grandfather was clearly shocked by the image. Even more shocking was that the people in the image could see him. They quickly began to call out in anxious voices. "Save us, Patriarch, help me, Grandfather, Patriarch, it's me, Tanner. Help me." Shockingly, these were all of the members of the Miao clan. They only represented about 70 to 80% of the clan as a whole, but that was still a large number. Furthermore, many of them were chosen of the clan, people who the patriarch had spent blood, sweat, and tears, not to mention significant cultivation resources, to groom as necromancers. They represented the reserves of the entire Miao clan, as well as its future. This Miao clan patriarch had carefully split his clan into smaller groups and hidden them away where he thought no one would be able to find them. Never could he have imagined that Bai Xiaochun would have the resources to track them all down. Actually, that was one of the first clues Bai Xiaochun had found, and a task he had immediately assigned to Zhou Yixing. Furthermore, the reason he had ordered him not to do anything at first was for fear of alerting his enemies. The reason he finally made a move on the Zhou clan was because he had gathered all the clues he needed, and he had decided to close the net. Of course, the ordinary cultivators of the Miao clan weren't necessarily very useful on their own. But Bai Xiaochun had long since come to the conclusion that if Bai Hao were still alive, then he would end up in this very situation, where the Miao clan patriarch would use Bai Hao to threaten him. And therefore, he would use the Miao clan itself to threaten the patriarch, as his trump card. That was another of the reasons why he had unhesitatingly cut down the heir apparent of the Zhou clan. That menacing action would be even more powerful than a mere spoken threat. Bai Hao, you. The Miao clan patriarch's eyes were completely bloodshot, and his mind was reeling. Within that projected image, he saw Miao Liner and all of the other young ones in the clan that he had not just painstakingly groomed, but also dearly loved. He thought back to life in his clan, how these young ones had been so attached to him, and suddenly he began to breathe raggedly. At the same time, a look of struggle appeared in his eyes. As of this moment, their life or death would be decided by one simple action on his part. This isn't everyone in your clan, Bai Xiaochun said, slowly and clearly, but don't worry. If my soul slave perishes, then trust me, I will do everything in my power to track down every last child of the Miao clan, no matter where they are hiding, and put them to death. I will ensure that the wildlands never again has a hint of a clan named Miao. Every bloodline will be wiped away. Bai Xiaochun knew that the fact that the Miao clan patriarch was using Bai Hao to threaten him indicated that his identity had not been revealed. If it had, the patriarch wouldn't need to threaten him. He could overturn Bai Xiaochun's entire world with ease, and place him in the most dangerous of deadly situations. Something else that made Bai Xiaochun tremble in anger was the knowledge that the Miao clan patriarch could not easily soul-search Bai Hao. And yet, the patriarch would obviously have wanted to know exactly how Bai Hao had come to be. Because of that, Bai Xiaochun could only imagine the suffering and torment he had undergone. And yet, the Miao clan patriarch had failed in his efforts. Bai Xiaochun had already been unwilling to abandon his apprentice before, but that added realization bolstered his convictions. The Miao clan patriarch's lips quivered, and his eyes grew increasingly bloodshot. He was even finding it hard to breathe. It was almost like he had split into two people, one of whom represented his clan, and the other of whom represented himself. And the two of them were fighting back and forth for the superior position. Would his desire to become an earthly necromancer outweigh his duty to his clan? It was in that exact same moment that Bai Xiaochun once again spoke. Under no circumstances will I allow you to leave here today. And I don't need to rely on luck to make sure that happens. You will die today, no matter what. Either give me my soul slave, and be the only person to die, or, you, your clan, and my soul slave, can all die together. There is no escape for you, and no one will come to your rescue. Don't bother trying to buy time. I'll say it only once more. You have 10 breaths of time. After that, I will give the order for my corpse troopers to attack. Then, you can watch the blood of your clan flow in rivers toward the netherworld as you die along with them. Although Bai Xiaochun's heart was racing in anxiety, his face didn't show it. He seemed cold, ruthless and emotionless, and his voice contained decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. With that, he flicked his sleeve, looked at the image of Zhou Yixing, and said, "Start the countdown, Zhou Yixing. After 10 breaths of time, execute the Miao clan." 10, 9, 8. The Miao clan patriarch shivered and panted more than before. Bai Xiaochun's words were like sharp knives that stabbed deep into his heart and mind, pushing him to the brink of complete collapse. That was especially true considering that Bai Xiaochun had said that he would die no matter what. And he only had 10 breaths of time to make his decision. By this point, he was convinced that Bai Xiaochun truly had made a decision to kill him, and that there was no way out of the situation. What do I do? He thought. What am I supposed to do? As the Miao clan patriarch chuckled bitterly, and Zhou Yixing counted down loudly, the Miao clan cultivators began to beg and plead even more loudly than before. Save us, Patriarch. 5. 4. Zhou Yixing's words blasted into the Miao clan patriarch's ears like thunder. The patriarch stared at Bai Xiaochun, hoping to get some clue from him to indicate that perhaps he was bluffing. But no matter how he looked at him, he seemed cold and ruthless. He looked like he would go to any lengths necessary to see the patriarch dead. He cares about this soul, he thought, his heart pounding, but not enough that it can be used as a threat against him. Clearly, Bai Xiaochun either wanted the soul for himself, or didn't want anyone else to have it. The truth was that Bai Xiaochun was actually far more nervous than the Miao clan patriarch. And yet, he had to keep that hidden, down to the tiniest scrap. He knew that if he let the Miao clan patriarch go, he would lose the initiative, and his opponent would be in control of Bai Hao's life. At that point, if the other 12 clans and the 9 Serenities king took action, it would be virtually impossible for him to save Bai Hao. Delaying matters wouldn't do any good. He needed to decisively end matters right here and now. His only hope was to see which of the two of them was more vicious. He had to make it seem like he wanted the man dead no matter what. Only by destroying his opponent's hope for life could he possibly awaken his sense of responsibility toward his clan. At that point, the man would be forced to choose who died, himself or his clan. In the end, most ordinary people would pick the former. The former was not death, it was sacrificing oneself for one's people. If the patriarch somehow saw through Bai Xiaochun's act, and realized that he cared about the situation even more than the patriarch, then Bai Xiaochun would be forced to compromise, and let him go. 3. Zhou Yixing's killing intent grew stronger, and the murderous aura of the 1,000 corpse troopers raged. Sacrifice yourself to save your clan? Bai Xiaochun said coldly. Or be buried along with them? The choice is up to you. He raised his hand up into the air, and everyone could see that, if he dropped it, it would indicate that the executions were to be carried out. He didn't need to make lengthy speeches. In fact, saying too much right now could actually be counterproductive. 2. Zhou Yixing said. The pleading of the Miao clan became like a sound wave that battered at the patriarch's heart and mind. He was on the verge of complete mental and emotional collapse. With the weight of death looming over him, his sense of duty toward his clan was now starting to outweigh his own selfish interest. To some extent, the scene playing out was a mockery. Although the patriarch seemed to be ready to sacrifice himself for his clan, the truth was that if he could sense the slightest bit of hesitation in Bai Xiaochun, the slightest chance that he might make it out alive, he would make a very different decision. 1. As the word left Zhou Yixing's mouth, the Miao clan patriarch smiled bitterly. Then he reached up to his forehead, grabbed Bai Hao, and threw him toward Bai Xiaochun. Let my clan go, he said. A man must take responsibility for his actions, therefore, my life is yours for the taking. Bai Xiaochun's heart was pounding so hard that his veneer of coldness shattered. His anxiety erupted as he reached out to grab Bai Hao. Bai Hao was clearly very weak, but as soon as Bai Xiaochun grabbed him, he opened his eyes and stared in shock and incredulity. Master, he said, then he passed out. Heart trembling, Bai Xiaochun sent some divine sense out to confirm that Bai Hao was merely unconscious. Then he put him into his soul-hoarding pagoda in his bag of holding. When the Miao clan patriarch saw all of that, his eyes went wide, and his mind began to spin. He heard Bai Hao call Bai Xiaochun master, and saw how much Bai Xiaochun cared about him. Finally, everything suddenly clicked into place. The patriarch began to gasp for breath as the sacred feeling of having sacrificed himself for his clan was replaced by pure humiliation. You tricked me, Bai Hao. The Miao clan patriarch's howl was one of utter defeat. He had lost many things a moment ago. His wisdom, his judgment, Bai Hao, and his own life. He had been completely and utterly vanquished. Kill those two, Bai Xiaochun said coldly, flicking his sleeve. All of the corpse troopers, even the one in silver armor, took to action, murderous auras raging. The silver-armored corpse trooper alone would have been enough, but they all attacked. Therefore, there was nothing that the Miao clan patriarch or Zhou Wudao could do to fight back. They were killed in body and soul. They had been able to struggle a bit while Bai Hao was still in their custody to use as a threat. But right now, their screams and curses filled the air as their bodies were ripped to shreds. Blood and gore exploded out in all directions, and their nascent divinities were shattered. For the Zhou clan, it was the end of an era. Although they still existed, for all intents and purposes, they were dead. Their heavenly marquee pagoda had been destroyed, and their heavenly marquee killed. Their heir apparent was dead, and the Zhou clan would be stricken from the list of the heavenly marquee clans. The Miao clan had once been one of the most powerful clans in the wildlands with their earthly necromancer. But now, they had no pillar of strength to support them. Of course, Bai Xiaochun did not go back on his word. He said that he would spare the Miao clan, and he did. However, he had Zhou Yixing secretly place branding marks on all of them. Although they escaped with their lives, if Zhou Yixing ever needed to, he would have a way to easily threaten them. And if they ever harbored truly ill intentions, he could easily kill them. Not all the Miao clan cultivators got off easily, though. Bai Xiaochun had Miao Liner imprisoned in the Grand Asylum. Her incredible good looks would obviously cause wicked thoughts to rise up in the men in the prison, but at the moment, Bai Xiaochun wasn't feeling merciful. The events of the day immediately caused a stir in Arch-Emperor City. There wasn't a single person who didn't hear about what had occurred. As for the heavenly marquises, they were stricken with fear down to the last one. Although all of them had had conflicts and even some fights with Bai Xiaochun, so far, none of the interchanges had ever escalated to the point of people dying. But now, a heavenly marquis and his successor had both been cut down. Even a heavenly marquis pagoda had been destroyed. After the initial gasps of shock, everyone assumed that what had happened had been ordered by the Grand Heaven Master. However, it didn't take long before the Grand Heaven Master expressed his anger about the matter. At that point, the heavenly marquises realized that the inspections commissioner had been acting for personal reasons. This Bai Hao is crazy. I can't believe he actually killed people. He actually went and killed a heavenly marquis without the consent of the Grand Heaven Master. This defies all laws and principles, even those of the heavens. This guy cannot be tolerated any longer. The inspections commissioner has too much power. If he can go crazy and kill Zhou Wudao, then who will be the next person he targets for death? This Bai Hao is a traitor. This is Arch-Emperor City. Who does he think he is, the second Grand Heaven Master? The heavenly marquises were all enraged. Their previous hatred, especially that caused by the proclamation of universal grace and the losses they had sustained because of it, caused them to detest Bai Xiaochun with all their being. Because of their hatred and fear, there was no way that they would let Bai Xiaochun's one enormous illegal act just go unanswered. It didn't take long before the heavenly marquises were heading en masse to the imperial palace. This time he's going to die beyond the shadow of a doubt. There's no way that this Bai Hao will escape by the skin of his teeth this time. No superhuman abilities will help him this time. He won't even have a corpse left. Nobody can save him. The inspections commissioner's power comes from the Grand Heaven Master. Today, he will face major tribulation. The heavenly marquises weren't the only ones to take action. The 10 heavenly dukes left their heavenly duke pagodas and also headed to the imperial palace. Chen Haosong took the lead, a cold smile on his face. He knew that not even the Grand Heaven Master would be able to protect Bai Hao this time. Bai Hao's crime was far too dramatic, and had crossed a bottom line that nobody in Arch-Emperor dynasty could accept. All of the nobility and aristocracy were up in arms. As for the common people, when they heard about what had happened, they gasped at the enormity and insanity of it all. It didn't take long for the news of Bai Xiaochun killing a heavenly marquis to reach the farthest corners of the wildlands. When the giant ghost king heard of it, his anger flared. He quickly pulled out a jade slip to send a message to Bai Xiaochun, but after a moment, put the jade slip away. Then he stamped his foot in anger, causing the entire royal palace to shudder. Too reckless. When the 9 Serenities king got the information via jade slip, he frowned. He didn't care much that Zhou Wudao and the Miao clan patriarch had been killed. The only reason he had helped them to begin with was because it benefited him. Although he didn't particularly care for Bai Xiaochun, he viewed him like an ant whose life or death didn't matter at all. However, he did care about the fact that a heavenly marquis pagoda had been destroyed. Strange, he murmured. Meanwhile, in another part of 9 Serenities City, Prince Zhou Hong heard the news and immediately broke out into delighted laughter. Bai Hao, Bai Hao. How will you possibly avert disaster this time? Virtually everyone felt the same, that the situation was completely unresolvable. As the wildlands was shaken by the news, Bai Xiaochun was back in the inspections manor, where he had gone immediately after the events in the Zhou clan. He tossed his inspections commissioner medallion into his bag of holding, and dismissed Zhou Yixing with orders to lay low until things calmed down. As for his corpse troopers, they stood in ranks, motionless. At the moment, the only thing Bai Xiaochun cared about was Bai Hao, who lay in his soul-hoarding pagoda, slowly recovering. Eventually, his eyes fluttered open, and the first thing he saw was his master, looking very haggard. Finally awake, Bai Xiaochun said, a smile on his face. You need to be more careful in the future. Come, let master tell you what's happened in the last month. HMMMPHH. You have no idea how awesomely your master handled things. No one dared to provoke me. I even went and accused Devas. Smiling, he went on to explain everything that had happened. To him, things already seemed like they had been a month before, with he and Bai Hao together, depending on each other for survival. However, the more he talked about everything, the more Bai Hao's eyes began to glaze over. Master, he said, trembling. When he heard that his master had enacted the proclamation of universal grace for him, and then learned of everything after that, he was suddenly struck deeply with a feeling of warm gratitude. Eventually, he flew out of his soul-hoarding pagoda and dropped to his knees to kowtow to Bai Xiaochun. I never thought I would see you again, master, he said, his heart surging with emotions that he couldn't even express. After being captured, he had endured a month of torment, and yet had never revealed any of his master's secrets. As of this moment, it all seemed worth it. After all, the person Bai Hao cared about most in his heart was his master. To Bai Hao, the past month had been one of endless darkness and pain. He had felt himself being slowly burned away as the Miao clan patriarch refined him. There had even been times when the patriarch attempted to soul-search him. The Miao clan's flame-conjuring techniques required that they soul-search and torment the intelligent soul until it submitted. Only then could the flame be conjured successfully. It was only possible to imagine how much pain Bai Hao had experienced. During that time, he had been completely powerless to do anything. There were times when he had almost wished he could die, but in his determination, he had refused to give in. His master had not yet conjured 19-colored flame, and in fact, he had not yet seen him succeed with 18-colored flame. And he had sworn an oath that he would make sure his master fulfilled his dream of becoming a heavenly necromancer. Therefore, he couldn't die. Nor did he want to. Maybe he would die one day, but it would only be after he helped his master accomplish everything he needed to. Only then could he close his eyes in that final rest. There were just too many things left to be done. Furthermore, he was also worried about what his master would do without someone to watch over him. Presumably, he would get himself in all sorts of dangerous situations, and Bai Hao knew he needed to be there to give advice, and to help solve the problems. That was his focus and determination, and it kept him going the entire month. He wasn't sure how much longer he would have been able to hold out, and eventually, he simply lapsed into unconsciousness. And then, he opened his eyes to see his master. When Bai Xiaochun saw the look in Bai Hao's eyes, he felt very pleased with himself, and mused that he really was a trustworthy and inspiring master. Tousling Bai Hao's hair, he said, ha ha ha. Moved? Well, didn't master tell you that after you become his apprentice, you wouldn't regret it? Bai Hao immediately kowtowed deeply and said, Master, you have shown me incredible kindness. You saved my life. I will never forget this for the rest of my life. It was almost exactly the same as the scene which had played out in that mountain cave when he had just regained his mind after being a vengeful soul. He kowtowed with no regrets and with full sincerity. Bai Xiaochun stuck his chin up and flicked his sleeve. You're my apprentice, he said grandly, and if anyone dares to lay a hand on you, they're basically slapping me in the face. Proclamation of universal grace? If that hadn't worked, my next plan was to get the lands of Heavenspan to invade the wildlands to save you. As of this moment, he didn't look at all like the cold and ruthless person he had been in the past month. He was finally back to normal. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.